Hello and welcome to Become the Teapot. I'm Iain.
And so am I. This is the podcast where we compare comic books to their on-screen counterparts in an ongoing effort to get my friend to read more comics. And this month, all month, is X month.
Or to be more precise, Ryanuary, in which we're revisiting the live-action appearances of one of my favourite characters, Deadpool.
This week we'll be attempting to overwrite the lingering memories of X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Why'd you have to remind me?
With the 2016 film, Deadpool. And we'll be skipping over his earliest appearances in the comics, in which he was a largely unrecognisable generic mercenary figure, and jumping straight to Joe Kelly's seminal run from 1997.
Sword arms and laser eyes.
Look, we better get started before Iain has an aneurysm.
They showed his goddamn mouth shut.
Shh. It's okay. It's okay. The real Deadpool's here now. Right, let's do this. Iain!
Hello.
Hello. So, Deadpool, it has been well documented on this podcast, is one of your favourite characters, I believe.
Indeed.
So, I take it you enjoyed the film. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I love it. I loved it when I first saw it. Love it now. I do get a bit bored of the cock jokes. There are a lot of cock jokes in this, but it's fun. It's a laugh. What did you think of the merc with the mouth? Or, actually, I'll call him by his proper name, Captain Deadpool.
Captain Deadpool. Yeah, no, I always enjoy it more than I think I'm going to. And I think when we talked about the Sewer Squad, I mentioned that it was a bit too self-knowingly irreverent, and it grated on me a bit. This is exactly the same. However, I think because that's very much Captain Deadpool's MO, it gets a bit more of a pass than the sort of group team effort things of the Sewer Squad. Perhaps it's just a bit of hypocrisy, but fuck it. No one said opinions had to be logical, did they? You know, I enjoy this more than I enjoyed that.
No, fair enough.
But yeah, no, I agree with you about there are definitely some jokes that just don't land for me. Like you say, there's a lot that have clearly been written for a 14-year-old boy. A lot of cock jokes. But I think much like the comics, actually, which we'll go on to later, because they come thick and fast, the jokes that don't land you sort of leave behind pretty quickly and you're soon chuckling away to something else.
It's just a blend of pop culture references and, like you said, just daft jokes.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's quite fun to just have those sort of crass jokes. But there's a couple of jokes that work a little bit better. Yeah, I liked the one about a fourth wall break inside a fourth wall break. I think that's a bit more...
That's like 16 walls.
Yeah, exactly. So stuff like that is a bit better. But yeah, no, there's a whole lot of cock jokes, which I can only assume are in there for the Borat crowd.
It's nice. It's funny. Should we move on to comics? No, there is a lot of this film that I do enjoy, putting the sort of pop culture jokes aside. There's the bit with the death with the Zamboni.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I find that hilarious every time that I watch it, because I forget how far away he actually is. Like, you're going to die in about 10 minutes. Yeah. And he's just crawling on the ice. It's classic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There are, the violence and the action, it blends well. It sells itself as something a bit more anarchic than your average superhero film, especially, the Fox X-Men films. I'm not sure entirely it is. It does fall into the sort of generic trap at the end with the showdown and things like that. But
yeah,
generally speaking, those early parts in particular were a bit different. I can absolutely see why someone might not enjoy this film, might not like it. It can be a bit much, I can imagine. But yeah, for me it works. It elicits enough chuckles, just has enough good action to keep it sort of romping along throughout. It's like what we were saying last time, if a film is enjoyable enough, then you're often willing to overlook the flaws in it, as it were, because you're enjoying the parcel as a whole. Whereas, the opposite was true last time. Yeah, one enjoying the film, so you end up just picking holes in the whole thing. What are those flaws for me? I think, like I said, the ending falls a bit flat. It's strange that the best action scene is the highway fight scene at the beginning.
Yeah.
That sort of...
Oh, yeah, and he's got the 12 bullets, which I think's genius.
Yeah, and it was all sort of leaked off that proof of concept CGI thing on YouTube, wasn't it? They leaked, in inverted commas again.
Someone leaked it.
Yeah, and everyone went nuts for it and wanted to see that film, and then it got made. But because obviously that was in the planning stage for ages, that felt like the most fleshed out and comprehensive action scene. Whereas the one at the end just felt like a bit of a tussle on a not helicarrier.
Yeah. They've said it's not, but it is.
Yeah. It definitely is, yeah. So, I find it fizzles out a little bit at the end for me, the film. But, I mean, yeah, up until sort of, an hour and a half of this hour and 50-minute runtime is just really enjoyable. So, and then it just becomes a little bit more generic action film.
Yeah, I don't think there's a bit in this that I got bored, which, it's about a 2-hour film, like you said.
Yeah.
And a lot of 2-hour films, you tend to start watching the clock and thinking, right, how long's left? Can I pause this and go get a drink? But no, I didn't actually, yeah. There are bits in it that do lull, but you need a lull in the film. You can't just be pure action for 2 hours.
Yeah, that can just be a bit overwhelming, can't it? I think this would especially be overwhelming in this film. Obviously, the way they do it, obviously breaking up the flashbacks to the present day story, I think works quite well to break it up from the pure non-stop zaniness.
Zany.
Which I think would get old quick.
Yeah, the marketing as well. I know we're going back a few years, but the marketing for this was genius. It was made to be like this couple's Valentine's Day rom-com, and it came out on the weekend of Valentine's Day, whatever year it was, which I actually saw at the opening weekend with Kate.
All right.
Happy Valentine's Day, let's go see this film. Which we both walked out of it just in hysterics. We just thought that's hilarious. And obviously he does make that joke in the film when he's shish kebabbed the bad guy. He's like, hey, my partner said this was a comedy or romance.
This is a superhero film, is what he says.
Yeah, it does then go into sort of the coupliness of him and Vanessa.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think Wade says at the beginning, this isn't a superhero, this is a love story.
Yeah.
I think that's why I'm a little bit more forgiving as well about the action scene at the end not really paying off, because the reunion with Vanessa is perhaps more important as a payoff for the film than the slightly lackluster fight. And I think that's what the film actually gets right, is that emotional connection of Deadpool. Too often in the comics where he just sort of guest appears in things, he just turns up as this sort of annoying clown. But the underlying sadness of Deadpool is what's important to him. At his worst in the comics and on the screen, he is just this wacky guy. He turns up and says a few pop culture.
Yeah.
At his best, he's this sort of tragic figure, a sort of Pierrot, a melancholy clown using humour to disguise loneliness and self-loathing.
And pain.
Yeah, and pain. And I think the irreverence is there, but it's a mask in much the same way he wears an actual mask to disguise his physical, the physical embodiment of his insecurities, as it were. So that's what I think the film balances quite well. It's difficult to do over a 2-hour origin story runtime, but you have to give Deadpool enough emotional stakes, even though he is a very outlandish character.
Oh, yeah.
And that can be a tricky balancing act, and it's something I think the film gets right.
Yeah, in this, it works really well. I think you may have brought this up on the podcast. Something that I don't quite like, but it works with the film, is how cartoony they've made Colossus.
Yeah.
And this is the part that I think you may have brought up before, is that he's just sat in the X mansion in his silver kind of form watching TV.
Yeah.
And you're going to think, would he have done that? Would the character have done that? Really? Probably not.
No, yeah. They sort of, like they say, I think the opening credits, a CGI character.
Yeah.
And that is all he is, because they don't actually have a human actor for that role. And we'll see in the sequel when they do a CGI character that does have flesh, that it doesn't look quite real, which we'll discuss next episode. But yeah, so I get why they did that, but I agree with you. It is a little bit strange that he's just sort of this big cartoon figure. But he is a more accurate representation of Colossus, perhaps, than the ones we've seen in the past.
Yeah, he's appeared in X2 and 3.
X2 and 3, I think he was in Days of Future Past as well. But he is very much a superpower with a man attached in those films. He is not actually a character. He is a man who can turn into metal, and that is it.
Yeah. Although I do find it quite funny that he hates bad language more than Captain America.
Well, they've played it up a little bit, his little humble origins, but he is sort of a gentle giant. He's an artist. He's meant to be this big, huge guy with a poet's soul and an artist's eye and things like that. So I like that they've played that up a little bit in this, but they've taken it to the nth degree with him. I would prefer not to hit women and things like that. But I like that sort of cartooniness, and I like those little in jokes as well about, can we not afford any other X-Men? It's strange that a big house like this has only got the two of them.
Someone that I thought I would learn more about, but he didn't appear in this comic, was the bad guy in this, Ajax.
Yeah, the comic we're reading today is a bit more of a get-to-know Daredevil. Sorry, no. Get-to-know Captain Deadpool.
Or Scare Devil.
Scaredevil, one of the names. Yeah, it's a bit more of a get to know the character comic than it is this is his origin. Although there is a bit of his origin in issue 0. I assume you read that.
I don't think it did, actually. I think I skimmed past that one. Yeah.
Okay, in that case, there's a bit more of his origin in that. It's the story with Vanessa. Did you have that one in your collected edition?
That might have been 0, in fact.
That is, yeah. So if you're reading on Marvel Unlimited, listeners, you will get the first 6 issues, I think it is, and then it goes to issue 0, which is the backstory with Vanessa, and then you get the continuation of that story up until issue 11 is what we've read today.
Yeah.
11 being the Spider-Man issue.
So good. Anyway.
We'll come back to that. But yeah, so this isn't exactly the best, like, you know, one-to-one transition from page to screen. I think that's generally something that the MCU has done, and Fox to a lesser degree, that has worked quite well. It's just taking the essence of characters and taking characters that sort of fit and throwing them in. They still had to do the little Fox thing where they went, let's throw a couple more characters in.
Yeah. Let's put a good handful.
Yeah, little soupçon of X-Men. But yeah, no, Ajax doesn't turn up in the comic. T-Ray, who is another of Deadpool's villains, does turn up in the comic, but we don't really have the payoff with him yet in the 11 issues we read.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll come back onto that, unless you want to move on to the comics now.
Well, that was just what I was going to say, is Ajax, I'm assuming, is from the comic.
He is, yes.
Right, okay, but he's not like a pivotal Deadpool bad guy, is he? He's just like a bad guy overall in Marvel.
In as far as Deadpool has pivotal bad guys, you know, he doesn't... His rogues gallery is fairly limited and they often end up dying.
Right.
So, you know, he doesn't necessarily have a big bad. Very few characters actually do, if you think about it. You know, Spider-Man and Batman are very much the outliers of characters with huge rogues galleries of significant importance.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ajax was one of the antagonists for Deadpool. Right. Probably one of the more well-known ones, but that's not saying a lot.
Well, I think just before we move on to the comics, we've not really touched on the main character of the film. And how...
Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
Yes, that one. And how it's a 100% improvement of Origins.
Oh, yeah.
First of all, he can talk, so that's good.
It's a bonus.
He's got a mouth.
He does. And he runs it constantly.
This is, I think, Fox throwing everything they've got at the wall to be like, I'm so sorry what we did. This is what we can do. But I believe that Ryan Reynolds is the character.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not taken out of the film thinking, well, that's just Tom Cruise playing Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Yes, you can make an argument it's Ryan playing himself, but with a character like this, it works so well.
Yeah, I think this is it. I mean, Ryan Reynolds came about in 90s comedies. And Deadpool came about from 90s comedies, is very much based on that sort of sensibility. So Ryan Reynolds playing Ryan Reynolds, which he so often does, is very similar to what Deadpool should be.
Yeah.
There's a joke in the comics, not one we read, but it's, you know, I look like Ryan Reynolds crossed with a Shar-Pei. So, yeah, I mean, it's always been referenced that he is a bit like Ryan Reynolds or a sort of 90s wisecracking comedy character.
Well, he does make a joke in this that it looks like he got bit by a radioactive Shar-Pei.
Yeah.
So that joke is in there, but you might not pick up on that unless you've seen that particular comic panel.
Yeah, so they sort of reused that joke, although they still also had references to Ryan Reynolds in here, which I thought was, again, that sort of fourth wall breaking.
Yeah.
And that's something that became more and more prevalent. You notice in the comics we read, there's a couple of instances of it, but it definitely is something that becomes more and more prevalent for the character as time went on. I completely agree, though. It seems that they are trying to atone for Origins and give the people what they want. I think that, you know, by this point they had been sort of screwing up the franchise for long enough. They realised that if you just went a bit more comic accurate, I think obviously the MCU was in full flow at this point, and they realised you could do colourful characters and things like that. And what's even more bold is obviously they go R-rated with it, you know.
Yeah.
18 in this country, I believe it was. May have been a 15.
Yeah, 18. R-rated.
R-rated. Well, that's R-rated doesn't necessarily translate to 18 over here. Sometimes they're 15s.
There's a little fun fact for you.
I'll have to check that out. I mean,
No, it's true. We always say whatever said on this podcast is true. There are no lies in this podcast.
Okay. But yeah, no, I think that was especially bold, considering the comic isn't actually... People are saying, it has to be R-rated. Well, the comic isn't, but okay.
Well, that's something that... I was going to actually ask you this towards the end, but I'll chuck it in now.
Okay.
Now that obviously Fox has been bought out by Disney,
yep.
So now the MCU own this character.
They do indeed.
They will probably have to recast the majority of the X-Men. But with Deadpool, do you reckon they should recast or bring him in as is, or water him down to be still R-rated, but in a comical way where he swears but it beeps? That kind of joke, if you know what I mean.
I can see them continuing to allow him to be R-rated in his own films. So Deadpool 3 could be R-rated. But almost certainly when he appears in other things, he won't be.
Yeah.
You know, so if he crops up in the Avengers or whatever it is, he's not going to be R-rated, is he? So I can see that being the sort of compromise. But as I say, in the comics, it works just like that as well. You know, he doesn't swear, really, in the comic books. If they do, they put the asterisks and whatever else in there instead of it. So I think that more than likely he will be allowed to be an R-rated for his trilogy, but any other appearances will perhaps be toned down in terms of the violence and gore. And I think what you might have is that you have it in this film to a certain extent is when Colossus reacts to him breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
And Colossus is sort of like, well, what are you doing? Who are you talking to? You know, that sort of...
But it's just a comment and that's it gone.
Yeah, exactly. You could easily do that. That is what the comics have been doing for years. Deadpool crops up, and this is what my concern might be slightly, is that he turns into the wacky comedy character who turns up and just makes a few wisecracks and then goes away again.
Yeah.
He needs a bit of pathos to him in order to be a compelling character, otherwise he's just a comic relief.
Yeah, which isn't always your favourite, is it?
I don't, you know, comic relief is very important for films. That's not a problem. But if it's going to be the main character, there has to be something else there. Otherwise, it's just make a comedy.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about the Eternals a few episodes back, and I said that, I can't remember his name now, but one of the ones of the Eternals was my favourite.
Yeah. He obviously stuck in your mind then. One of your favourites. Can't remember his name.
But yeah, well, yeah. the Bollywood guy. I can't remember his name.
No, I'm enjoying watching you struggle.
Fair enough. Him. That one.
It's Kumail Nanjiani's character. But yeah.
Yeah. He's the comic relief.
The thing is he had such a lot of focus on him. He had so much of the screen time, and then he has no payoff whatsoever, no point, ultimately, in the film. And I get, you know, I do kind of understand the point they're making with him, but in a film where you've already got 8 other main characters, it detracts from that. You also have his sidekick, who is also a comic relief character, but because he's not a focus, he's a more acceptable comic relief character to me. He comes up, he makes a few jokes, there's a few laughs that are gained from that, but it doesn't detract from the main plot.
Yeah.
Whereas you have another character in there. Anyway, I feel like we've gone off topic.
I think I've seen what's happened there. We've ended up talking about a different film.
We have, yeah. I'm going to say this is your fault. So let's move on to the comic before we get distracted again, because we have actually already spoke about it several times. So this is Deadpool Volume 1 by Joe Kelly. We're reading issues 0 to 11, although Iain may have only read 1 to 11. We'll figure this out. So this is, as I say, not Deadpool's earliest appearances. He started in pages of X-Force, I think it was. It's a sort of generic mercenary, you know, bulky guns and ammo pouches everywhere sort of character. And then over time, he became more of this character. And then Joe Kelly's run is really what sort of cements him as this merc with a mouth. And in fact, in the first issue, we have his powers being nerfed down to an acceptable level.
Yeah.
Because prior to this, he could have his arms and head chopped off and would just heal back and be like, oh, great, that was fun. Whereas in this, they've sort of nerfed him back to the sort of film levels that we get.
Yeah.
But anyway, reading this for the first time then, Deadpool Volume 1, what were your initial impressions?
Oh, it was great. You jump straight in with, obviously with comics, they've got to do is it someone that's talking normally, or is it just normally someone describing the environment? But what I mean by this is that in this, it turns out to be, it's him talking to you. And that comes across very quickly.
It's a narration.
That's the word I can't think of.
There we go.
So in the average comic, it's just, oh, here we are on a dark December night or whatever. But in this, it's very quickly him going, hey, it's me talking to you. I'm talking to you. Which I just kind of like that you jump straight in and you go, right, okay, we're in for that kind of comic, that kind of a ride.
Yeah.
And it works. It works so well.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think it really throws you in at the deep end. There's a lot of characters that are not explained in the first instance, a lot of things that happen and then will be filled in later.
Yep.
It's almost designed to sort of keep things bouncing around, keep the reader on their toes a little bit. And I think, yeah, for a character like Deadpool, that really works. You know, I'll admit I'm not, in the comics especially, not the biggest Deadpool fan, but I did go through a phase in around 2006, I think it was, when Cable and Deadpool was still coming out. I went back and read all of this and read all the way through to the end of Cable and Deadpool. I've read some of his more recent stuff. And overall, in a lot of his more recent appearances especially, I find him more annoying than funny.
Yeah, I can't remember the writing staff, but they brought out a new run of his, I think it would have been last year. It was around the same time that those X-Men comics came out that you advised me to read, so I bought them.
The Dawn of X stuff.
Yeah, I bought them, didn't read them.
Okay.
But at the same time, I bought the new run of Deadpool. And I read the first issue and I've not yet gone back to it. But just from memory, comparing it to this, you are right. He's a bit more of a pain in the arse. He's a bit less funny in the current ones. This one's the pop culture stuff that he's talking about and how quick it moves. It sort of adds to the story, adds to the character.
Yeah.
This new run that I've not yet got into properly, it's a little bit like, how many pages have I got left? One of those comics.
I gotta say, the Jerry Duggan run, I didn't mind much. That was a few years back. I thought that was good. There was a really bad run around 2010, 11, I think it was. Can't remember the writer of that one, but that really just devolved into just sort of dick jokes and nothing else. It was a really rubbish run. But no, this is probably the run of Deadpool that I've enjoyed the most.
Yeah.
Like you say, Cable and Deadpool carried on from this almost. So, you know, that has a similar tone. But yeah, like you said about pop culture references there, actually. I think the thing with a character that uses pop culture references as frequently as Deadpool does is it does date the story a little bit. I don't know if you found that.
Yeah, we said this about, I want to say Scott Pilgrim, but I'm probably wrong.
I don't think it was Scott Pilgrim. It was definitely something. Yeah, I know what you mean. There was definitely something, we talked about it. And yeah, when a character is using references like this from the late 90s, it means very little to me, because we would have been about 9 when this came out. Yeah. It presumably means even less to other people.
Yep.
And at the time, it was probably all hip and trendy, and people were picking this up in teenagers picking this up in 1997, chuckling at all the references to MTV. But nowadays it seems very much, "How do you do, fellow kids?" Sort of. It very much it comes very outdated very quickly. I find. It's got that similar thing to the film where there's so much of it that it doesn't really matter. There's so much going on that there's a crap reference to something you don't really get, but in another panel's time there'll be 2 or 3 other jokes that you can laugh at.
Kick-ass.
It was kick-ass. It was kick-ass.
That's all right.
Yeah.
I was totally paying attention to what you were saying, but also in the back of my head,
Kick-ass. It was all those MySpace references in Kick-ass, yeah.
Yeah, and Stereophonics.
Yes, yeah, that was it.
There we go. Anyway, talking about Deadpool then, let's not talk about Kick-ass. What I did quite like, and I don't know if you would like it as well or if other readers would like it, but I did like how each sort of comic had almost a different bad guy or a different character that you already kind of knew.
Yes.
For me, especially, it was the Hulk, which I was very impressed that he could talk. I didn't think that he was going to be talking. Taskmaster, which I've seen in cartoons, and also Black Widow.
Yep.
Which, and then he meets Dr. Kilbrew.
He does.
Was he in Weapon X? That actually the character's name in the Weapon X comic?
I don't believe it was, no.
Right, okay. I know that they kept saying it was, but I didn't know if that actually
he was
was
a part of the process that made Deadpool, which was part of the Weapon X project in the comics.
Yeah, and then you get Craven coming in at the end. So many in there that I've forgotten a lot of them.
No, you are right. There's a couple of repeat stays. So you had Bloody Mary. Typhoid Mary.
That's it.
In a couple of issues. Yeah, but the first one you had Sasquatch, then Taskmaster, then Hulk. Almost every issue there was a guest appearance, and this is quite common for characters that are not quite established yet, not relating to sport. And it's funny that Deadpool became one of those characters who would show up in comics to boost sales.
Yeah.
And that's very much what was happening here, is you stick Hulk on the front cover and people go, "Oh, Hulk's in this issue. I'll pick it up."
Yeah, but now, if you put Deadpool in an Avengers comic, people go, "Oh, he's in it." So it's flipped.
I mean, to a lesser extent now, but certainly 10 years ago, Deadpool probably reached his sort of zenith, as it were. 5-10 years ago, he was like in everything. Ridiculous. They did a series of covers with Deadpool, alternate covers with Deadpool on them, the hip-hop Deadpool covers. Yeah, he was everywhere. But, this is obviously early days Deadpool. This is before he was famous, very much establishing the character.
So, I do want to go on to talk about the last issue, the Spider-Man one, because that is just excellent.
Yes.
But before I do, obviously you've covered there about what you've read before. You've gone back to read Joe Kelly's run.
Yeah.
You've read a lot of Deadpool and Cable, or Cable and Deadpool. Don't know which way it is.
Cable and Deadpool.
Apart from the one that I mentioned about that new run of last year, without having to look it up, I've only really read Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe.
Right, okay.
So I think that was my introduction to the comic book character himself.
Yeah.
Which, that one is, I would say, a lot more gory than this is. Because I think that's the idea of it, that he's getting a bit more gory. I don't know if that's right or not.
Well, it's very much a Elseworlds tale, and it comes from that sort of Punisher kills the Marvel Universe and things like that. There's other runs like that. So yeah, it stands alone, and it is very much its own thing. And it definitely comes from the era when Deadpool was, you stick his name on anything and it will sell. So it's that sort of, you don't really need to write the character as in depth. People are used to this character, and you can just have him going off and doing different things. Put Deadpool in a scenario and see what happens.
Without me having to find the book, don't suppose you know if that came out after the Joe Kelly run or before?
Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe. That would after.
After,
yeah,
right, okay.
After. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was probably around the Way run, about 2010ish, I think.
But yeah, that's my history, I guess, with the cartoon character or comic book character. I mean, I can't not wait any longer. Shall we talk about the final issue 11?
Yeah, okay.
It's great. I love it. It's something that I wanted to read for a while.
Yeah.
And even before we mentioned this run, I went away and bought 2 volumes of Deadpool.
Yeah.
Which ends up being the Joe Kelly run.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got one book here. It's the Complete Collection, Volume 1, Book 1, which is 1 to 11. It's got 0 in the middle of it, so I skipped past that because we never actually talked about that.
I think you should read it. That's the one that has Vanessa and his backstory.
And also I've got a Daredevil and Deadpool annual, which comes in the middle of, I think it's like 7 and 8 or 8 and 9 or something. But again, I sort of skipped past that just because I wanted to stick to the main comics that we were reading.
Yeah.
It's the 3rd book that has the Spider-Man copy in it, which I haven't yet got. But I've got 1 to maybe 9 on my shelf, and now I've got a book with the same comics in them. I just love the character so much that I've bought the book. Not the same book, but it's the same issues twice.
You keep buying different books with all the same issues in. You can buy the Joe Kelly Omnibus next and see if
Yeah, why not? But I'm so glad that I read the Spider-Man issue after we covered Spider-Man for Sam Raimi's Spider-Man film last year.
So those early 60s Spider-Man stories. Yeah.
So it goes from this wise-ass cracking...
Wise ass cracking.
That guy. It goes to him to a 60s Spider-Man comic, and it's that huge text. It's all the slang terms are the same. I love it. I want to go on to read the original Spider-Man, which is actually in the book as well.
That's what I was going to ask, because on the Marvel Unlimited app, it also does the same thing on that. It puts the original comic straight in after that. And I did flick through it. I read it. I didn't read it in full because I'd already just read it, but it's amazing. The transitions that he uses between panels is all there from the original comic book.
Mm-hmm.
All of these references. I just love the things that in the panel where Mary Jane just starts dancing. And in the original comic, it's just to show, oh, Mary Jane's turned up, look how free-spirited she is. And then you have Blind Al's internal monologue with her going, well, this idiot has started dancing. You know, she must be daft as a brush or whatever it was. You know, it's absolute idiot coming in here. Yeah, I just love that. A modern sensibility, those people looking at these 1960s comics as if they were there. I really liked those references.
Well, there's a panel, I don't think it's from this issue, but at the end of, I think it was the Green Goblin one, where he kills... Or Blondie, what's her name?
Gwen Stacy?
Gwen Stacy, thank you. There's a bit at the end of that where it's in a back road and you see a figure.
You do, yeah. Harry Osborn's shadow.
And I think we spoke about that.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that same panel's in this, but then Deadpool just walks out or something. But it might not be Harry.
It was for Weasel's origin, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You see a shadowed figure and then he steps out as Peter Parker. But it is Deadpool, isn't it? Because he's using the image inducer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is it. I know it's poking fun at these 1960s Spider-Man stories, but it also seems like a love letter.
Yeah.
It's clearly from someone who has really studied this original comic in great depth and has gone to massive efforts to replicate it whilst adding all this humour in. I think sometimes when you go back and you have time travel hijinks with established stories, especially long-standing ones, it can be a little bit treading on thin ground. But no, I think he does really well here because you can tell that it's done with a lot of reverence and love for the original stories, even though it can poke fun at them.
Yeah, I do know that, I'm not sure if this is a recent thing, but Deadpool does love Spider-Man, but it's not reciprocated. Spider-Man thinks he's a bit of a twerp.
Yeah. And there was also a more recent story where Deadpool went back to the 1970s, although time frames are funny, and met up with Power Man and Iron Fist in the 1970s, and there was a similar sort of crossover event there.
Your favourite?
It was, yeah, that's the reason I own it. I think it was Deadpool number 13 in one of the more recent runs, but it had them appearing, so it was an annual or something. But yes, that's a similar story. This story has obviously had an impact going forward because it has been replicated again with him doing time travel to other eras and interacting with other characters.
Something else that I did pick up on is, I'm assuming, and I don't know if I'm just trying to put this person's name on this character. But the old crazy man on the bench in the park with the big old beard, I'm assuming that was some sort of take on Alan Moore.
He has the badge on him.
The badge with the blood smear on it. Obviously, that didn't appear till later on, so I just thought it was just some random guy. And you realise he's just a bit crazy and a bit grumpy.
Yeah.
Which that's kind of people's take on him, that he's a bit of an old and crazy man.
He will continue to appear, and obviously there was, of course, the scene in French, the whole scene in French, which was untranslated.
Yep.
But if you speak basic French, you could probably translate bits of it.
In that issue, the last page was translated on me.
What?
It goes back. And it says, by the way, this is what this scene said.
What? It didn't have that on the app. How dare they? Even as a joke, hasn't it? In French, it says an important conversation or something like that. And then it just has the whole thing in French and doesn't translate it. But anyway, yes, he will continue to crop up in Joe Kelly's Deadpool if you want to continue reading. But yeah, I don't know if he was intended to be Alan Moore, but there certainly were references there and certain aesthetic cues, although I don't think Alan Moore's ever been that sort of rotund.
No, not what I've seen him, anyway.
No, not really.
But yeah, there was so much in the comic, so much in the film to pick up on. Just going to sprinkle a couple in.
Well, hold on. If you're going to start listing Easter eggs, do you think it's time to go into Ian's egg hunt?
All right, then.
All right. Ian's egg hunt. Ian's egg hunt. Ian's egg hunt.
I'm not yoking you. Like I was saying before, I was rudely interrupted by my own theme music. In the comic, I do like that they just sprinkle a couple of characters' names through it, such as Cloak and Dagger, the Kingpin, Squirrel Girl. It's always fun to just read a name going, oh,
a reference. Ooh.
I know who that is. I know that guy. I know that person.
Yeah, well, it's hard to have a character like Typhoid Mary without referencing the Kingpin, for instance.
Yeah. Well, I say yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, she works for him. And then obviously there were references to the big things that were going on at the comics at the time, like Onslaught, which I don't know about your familiarity, but it was in the 90s. Marvel decided to kill off all of their mainstay heroes, although they all got shifted to an alternate universe, new universe. And then they introduced a lot of new characters to replace them.
Right.
This is why Deadpool got his own comic. It's why things like Thunderbolts came about and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the reason for that.
What I also do like in the comic, and I'll go on to some film Easter eggs in a second,
okay,
is that the Fastball special was mentioned by Siren in one of the early copies. And then later on, I think it's issue 11 or issue 10, Flatman and Doorman, I want to say.
Yes, Flatman and Doorman.
Do the Fastball special.
They do indeed.
I have never heard of Doorman or Flatman. I'm assuming Flatman is just some weird copy of Mr. Fantastic, and Doorman is some black-suited Deadpool hybrid Venom thing.
So these are the Great Lake Avengers, although they are a team in the comic books that frequently change their name.
Right.
They keep getting sued by people and having to keep changing names. So they were the Great Lake Avengers. In this, they are called the Lightning Rods after the Thunderbolts. And they are a team of quirky characters. So there's Big Bertha, who is a very 90s idea of an eating disorder superhero who is a supermodel who can turn into a big, fat, strong woman.
Yeah. Why do I know that?
I don't know. She has appeared in other comics since.
Yeah, I might have read
I
something.
think Deadpool had a crush on her at one point. And speaking of Squirrel Girl, she joined the Great Lake Avengers for a while anyway. She was on that team as a sort of quirky character as well.
Something else, actually, in the comic that I did pick up on is a reference to Madripoor, which comes up in Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
It does. It's I think stems from Wolverine comics in the 1980s, but it's his stomping ground when he was out there. So it's largely X-focused, but yeah, it's become a sort of mainstay fictional location within the Marvel universe. The 616.
Now it's in the MCU, people will be like, oh, I know that, like I just did.
Yeah.
I mean, as we've said, there's so many pop culture references in this film. I'm not going to go through all of them because I've heard there's more than 100 in there, and I'm sure you don't want to hear me go on for 100 Easter eggs.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I think one's too much, but...
Oh, in that case, I'll give you 2. But I do like that in the opening credits, along with the satirical names for the crew and the cast, you've got jokes for Brian Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, all of these sort of things, along with a Green Lantern playing card.
Yeah.
There's a coffee cup on there that says Rob L, which is obviously a reference to Rob Liefeld.
Yes.
Actually, the creator of the character. And the guy who can't draw feet. Is that right?
It is the guy who can't draw feet. He can't really. He's not a great artist. It's a strange thing in the 1990s. He was the superstar artist in the time. He was in I think it was Gap or Levi's. It might have been Levi's commercial. Yeah, big advertising campaign with this comic book artist as being the hot shot superstar. And he invented Deadpool in much the same way that someone doodling a character on the back of a fag packet did. You know, the character that he invented is the character who was a generic mercenary with lots of guns and pockets and ammos and things. It doesn't really impact on what the character became. So it's always a generous term to say he created him. He's also, from what I understand, very annoyed that they keep turning his characters into pansexuals or bisexuals. He's one of those guys who gets very up in arms about that on Twitter. So
Should we move on?
yeah. Yeah, no, just fuck Rob Liefeld. But no, Fabian Nicieza, who I believe is the other creator, you know, the artist and writer team, he wrote Cable and Deadpool, which we'll be reading next time. So I'm always much more willing to credit him as the creator of Deadpool in a way, and Joe Kelly, of course, for establishing who the character actually was.
Well, I don't really want to tell you my next Easter egg then in that case.
No, go on.
Rob Liefeld, the creator of the comics, and I'm doing the finger quotes, makes a cameo in this film. But yeah, I've got two more. Bandhu, the cab driver's cousin, is actually voiced by Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, okay.
When you start hearing him scream when he's in the trunk of the cab.
Yeah.
It's not credited, so it's an uncredited role for Ryan.
Yeah.
And I can't not, but you get a cameo from the late, great Stan Lee. He's a DJ, a very sleazy strip club.
Yeah, that was a pretty good cameo of his, isn't it? Because you can believe him being the DJ in a strip club.
You weirdly can, can't you? All the Marvel money is just run dry. He's got to get a job somewhere.
Sadly, I think that did happen, but yeah.
I'll finish. A little bit of an egg, a little bit of an interesting detail.
Yep.
You mentioned it earlier on about the fight at the end. Just before they head off to the fight, they pack all the guns in a bag.
Yep.
Then they leave it in the taxi. That was because the budget was cut by 7 mil.
Right.
Which meant they couldn't afford to do that last scene.
Oh, okay.
So they made the character go, oh no, forgot them.
They throw it in. Okay, well that explains why it's a little bit lackluster, that last fight then. But okay, well that's good to know. Budget constraints. No, that's good. All right, well, thank you very much. Shall we get back to the conclusion and wrap things up on the film and the comic before we go to any other business?
Yes.
Right, so film, comic, I think I know the answers, but what were your thoughts? Would you recommend them? What order? Etc.
Oh, film. Absolutely would recommend this film. If you want a fun action comedy, this is the one. Mm-hmm. If you're hungover, this is the one. If you just feel a bit sad and you just want someone to do cock jokes for 2 hours, no, it's not that bad. But no, yeah, it is. I would recommend it. I would also recommend the sequel, and I assume I'm going to recommend the third one when that comes out, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Comic, yeah, I would say go and read this one because, you know, we've spoke about other versions of the comic and the character. I think this one, it works. He's funny. He's not too annoying, but again, it works. You are thrown in and you pick it up as you read.
Yeah.
Self-film?
Yeah, no, I can absolutely see someone not gelling with this film. But no, for me, it works. I do enjoy it, even though it doesn't hit 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. I always find it a lot more enjoyable than I remember. I think I would recommend it to certain people. I know that if our friend Martin had not seen this film before, I would not recommend it to him because I don't think he would enjoy it. I can absolutely see this grating on him, and I understand why it would. But for me, it works. And the comic is, you know, I think it's a great run. I think Joe Kelly's run only gets better as well as he's finding his feet in these early issues, and then it sort of takes off as well in the next, I think up to about issue 24 are really good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would recommend if someone was interested in Deadpool, I would highly recommend picking up this run of comics in particular. I think probably the most important in terms of Deadpool's sort of lore and history and establishing who he was as a character. And I like that it has, from a relatively early stage, that sadness, you know, sort of sad clown effect for the character. You know, that sort of juxtaposition between his zaniness and the fact that he's just doing it to mask pain. But what was Kate's opinion of the film? So
she loves this as much as I did.
Yep.
So much so that her quick opinion is, I loved it.
That is a quick opinion.
There you go.
Okay, that's what we're looking for. Great. Well, that concludes this episode. Any other business?
Yes, so we have both finished Hawkeye.
We have.
And both watched Spider-Man No Way Home.
We have indeed, yeah.
I want to keep it spoiler-free, even though if anyone goes on Twitter at any point since these two things ended, I'll be very impressed if things haven't been spoiled.
No, I think you're right there. We are still in the middle of a global panini. We should probably try and avoid all spoilers because there are still people avoiding cinemas, etc., for very real reasons. So, yes, we will avoid any spoilers going forward. But, yeah, we should probably talk about those two things.
We'll start with Hawkeye.
Go for it.
All right, so we recently had a talk off air. Mm-hmm. Yes, we do talk to each other when we're not recording. And I think we agreed that next Christmas we would do Hawkeye,
I think so, yeah.
including Matt Fraction's run.
Yeah, the Matt Fraction David Ayer run. It's a Christmas story. This, not the comics necessarily, but yeah, so I think next Christmas we will be covering this again, revisiting it and getting you to read the comic books, because it is one of my favourite ongoing comic books ever. It is the same creative team as The Immortal Iron Fist. And you know my undying love for that comic book.
If only they made a TV show.
If only. I don't know what. Maybe that comes next. If Hawkeye's a big success, maybe they'll finally do an Iron Fist series. One can hope.
But yeah, so let's keep the Hawkeye review very quick.
Yes.
As a whole, did you enjoy it?
As a whole, I did. Yeah. I was a little concerned with how they would adapt the run to the MCU, because the character of Clint Barton is very different in the comics to how he is in the film and the TV show.
Yep.
But overall, I think they did a good job of taking the essence of things and transferring them without it being a literal adaptation. I really liked the lower stakes. I liked that it wasn't a big world-ending thing. It was very street level and very character based. And I liked all of that.
Yeah.
I think it worked really well for the character.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that, really. It's nothing too... I wouldn't say exciting, because it is quite exciting. But yeah, there's no big doom threat kind of thing. There's nothing that's going on in the big world, if you will.
Yeah, this is the thing. It doesn't have to be a world-ending event to be exciting.
Yeah.
Die Hard, which we talked about a few weeks ago, is extremely exciting. It's also a Christmas film, but it is about a robbery of a building.
Yeah.
And that is what this really reminded me of, is Die Hard. That sort of stakes.
Yeah, it's a little bit of this one man going, oh, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
All right, fine, I'll do it. But him and Haley Steinfeld,
Yes.
they work so well. It's the classic buddy cop film.
Yeah.
And it works.
I think it works really well. It's something that's taken from the comics. They've sort of reversed the roles for the TV show because, as I say, the character of Clint is so different. He's more of the sort of man-child in the comic, as it were, even though he's led the Avengers and led the Thunderbolts and all sorts. But yeah, he's sort of the wastrel in the comics. But yeah, and they sort of flip those roles here. And I think that works really well for that dynamic between them, like you say, that sort of odd couple pairing. And then there was a lot of, we won't go into them, but there was a lot of good guest stars and appearances that I think were utilised very well in that they weren't overdone. They were used sparingly enough to give the main characters most of the focus.
Yes. Well,
I think we've done all right there for non-spoilers.
very carefully danced around a few things. Yeah, so let's do the exact same thing with Spider-Man.
Yeah, so Spider-Man No Way Home. We've both seen this now, so what were your thoughts?
I was fangirling the entire film. Kate even turned to me, almost at the end in fact, and said, your laugh is far too loud and far too girly. Because it was when the mask came back as well, so I had a mask on the entire time, but all you could hear is me going... I was excited that something has happened. And I was the only one laughing because I knew a reference or a comic thing. But yeah, I don't know yet, but I might be one of my favourite Spider-Man films so far.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, I did rewatch Homecoming the other day.
I really like Homecoming.
It was on, so I just put it on. But yeah, there was a lot of surprises. I'm not going to say anything. A few surprised me more than others. I managed to avoid a lot of spoilers before seeing it.
Good.
So there were definite points that I got really excited. Yeah, and I think it's just... This could have been made in such a bad way, but I think they've made it in such a clever way that it works from every aspect. I'm trying to not be spoilery.
No, I know what you're saying. No, I enjoyed it a lot. And I was... Well, you know me, I am hesitant. I felt there was a lot going on. It was pure fan service and spectacle.
Yeah.
Unashamedly so. But that's okay. You know, sometimes all you want to see is your favourite GoBots being smashed together on screen and having a bit of a laugh with it. You know, I think some of the emotional elements didn't quite resonate with me because there was so much going on.
Yep, I know what you mean.
Some of the characters felt a little bit out of character, and some of the action, particularly towards the end, felt very generic and dark and muddy, just lots of graphics thrown together on the screen.
Yeah.
But overall, much like this film, the flaws aren't enough to put me off the overall fun that I had with the film. You know, I just generally was sitting there having, as a comic book fan, as a fan of Spider-Man films, just sitting there enjoying it, taking it in. Overall, it was a lot of fun. And like you say, there's a lot of references for fans. There's a lot going on for non-fans. If you've seen the trailer, you know what sort of ground it treads with regards to the multiverse.
Yes.
I do feel that Into the Spider-Verse handled it better. I think Into the Spider-Verse is still a better film for me.
Okay.
It's probably still my favourite Spider-Man film, up there with Homecoming and Spider-Man 2. But yeah, generally speaking, I think for a live action version of that sort of thing, this worked very well.
Yeah, I would say if you're an MCU fan and you're a Spider-Man fan, you need to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if you are a fan of those two things, you probably already have, unless you obviously are still avoiding cinemas. But yeah. It is a very enjoyable watch, but it is almost certainly completely been spoiled for you elsewhere by now.
Yeah, I assume it would be.
Yeah.
And I just want to put it back to an on-topic Any Other Business.
Yep.
Me and Kate, the other day, watched Red Notice.
Yeah.
We met up over Christmas and you and Hayley said that this would be my kind of film.
Yes.
I mean, I'd say you were half right. I got bored throughout this film.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like a 2-hour long film for no reason at all. Could have easily been an hour and a half.
Yep.
There's so much of it that I would have taken out. I came away from the film thinking, I've just wasted 2 hours of my life.
Oh, good.
Which, for a Ryan Reynolds film, that's quite rare for me.
Yeah. No, because we thought it was absolute crap. And that's why we kind of assumed you'd like it. So
There were the bits of it that I like, but
yeah.
it's too long, too complicated, too many twists.
It's just three boring people playing their exact same roles you've seen them play in a million other films, and they've played them better.
Yeah.
And like you said, the twists are all hugely predictable. I mean, it wasn't complete rubbish.
Yeah, it wasn't absolute turd, but it was turd adjacent.
Yeah, there was some stuff in there that was fine. You're like watching it going, all right, well, this is just a generic action adventure. But like you say, it's National Treasure, but worse.
Yeah.
Which is not a bloody great thing, is it?
No.
So yeah.
I think what I said to you and Hayley, or at least Hayley in the pub, is that I said, yeah, Ryan Reynolds, he's funny. I like him. Dwayne The Rock Johnson, yeah, I like him. Gal Gadot, yeah, it's all right to look at. That was about it, really. And I think that's the same view once I've seen the film. It's like, yeah, it's all right.
You've got two very charismatic actors who play the same role in everything, and then another actor who's not particularly charismatic who plays the same role in everything.
Yeah.
And put them together in a film. I think they just sort of went, yeah, that'll do.
Yeah.
We got those three people, put them in the film. What else do you need? People are going to go see this because look at these big stars. We don't need to write a script.
Well, it's one of, if not the highest grossing film on Netflix.
Yeah, the most viewed, I think one of the most viewed. Not necessarily grossing, so I don't think it made money, but however Netflix quantifies these things, I think they've authorised 2 sequels to it, so it obviously did well enough. But I think that'll do for this week. That's all for us. Thank you once again for joining us. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe for all of our upcoming episodes, including the culmination of X-Month 2, Ryanuary. If you want to get in touch, you can tweet us at becometheteapot or email us at becometheteapot@hotmail.com. We're also available on pretty much all of the other social medias, so check us out wherever you can. Next episode, we'll be rounding out Ryanuary with, you guessed it, the imaginatively titled Deadpool 2. It's a film about Deadpool and features the character of Cable, so what better comic to read than Cable and Deadpool from 2004? And then we probably should throw in a joke at the end, but I don't know what to say. Come on, give us a joke to round this out. Don't just say maximum effort.
Right, I'm off. I've got to go to a midnight screening of Blade 2.
Okay, don't forget your monochromatic clothes. Is this the joke? Is that how we end this? Wow, that's a new low.
Maximum effort.